All right, I would like to call to order the March 15th, 2016 Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Here.
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 All right, this time, if we could all please rise, pledge allegiance to the flag, and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, if we could have a moment of silence, please. All right, thank you. Silence is good because the days get pretty noisy. All right, this time we have the minutes from January 13th. As you recall, we did not meet in February. So, looking these over, would anybody like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as written here?
I make a motion to accept the minutes approval for January 13th, 2016, regular Planning Commission meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. All right, thank you. All right, this time, citizens' time. Seeing no citizens, we will close citizens' time. Announcements. Mr. Leek. Well, actually, go Ms. Pastanello first. Ladies first. Do you have any announcement?
Not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Leek?
No, sir.
All right. Any announcements I have is from here on out, we're going to meet the first Wednesday of every month starting in April. So it'll be the first Wednesday of every month. As you know, we moved it off Mondays a while back, and tonight was moved from Wednesday to Tuesday because of Mr. Marchant's other responsibilities, which unfortunately precluded the Carrolls from being here. We really want them here. But going forward, it'll be, again, the first Wednesday of every month. The only other announcement I have is I want to thank Marchant for speaking last night. I'd like to thank you for speaking, and for Councilman Pasanello for speaking, and Councilman Edwards. There was a good turnout at DVP, or at the DVP hearing at Battlefield. I thought a lot of good issues were raised, and the meeting went from about 4:30 to a little after 10. A lot of people got tired of waiting and left, but nonetheless, there was a lot of good comments, and I just hope that these people are listening, because I've yet to hear one person that's pro overhead lines anywhere in this region. So I just thank you to all those who spoke. Other than that, I think we're good. Do we have an ARB update?
No, sir. We do not have our past.
Okay. And then I guess the only other town council update, there's a couple potential offers on the table for the old police building, the old Lewis home. So I know Brian and the attorney are entertaining those. We'll be bringing it back to the council. So hopefully we can get some resolution on that, really get going on the park for the stakeholders. So other than that, I think we're good. So Mr. Marchant, you want to bring us into new business, a zoning ordinance rewrite kickoff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With me tonight is Darren Coffey with the Berkeley Group. He is our on-call planning services, and they have been very helpful. In the past, they developed your development impact analysis that I brought before the council, our proffer policy. They've also been diligently diving into the rewrite of the zoning ordinance. They'll also be looking at the subdivision ordinance, and we'll eventually move into the overhaul of the comprehensive plan. So Darren is here tonight to kick off the approach, and without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Darren.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Sorry the other two couldn't be here this evening
Right.
as well, but they can watch this and get the same homework assignment that you're going to get and be
Okay.
on the same page.
All right, and thanks for coming. I know this is important.
Yeah, it's exciting. What we're wanting to do with the town zoning ordinance is basically streamline it, strengthen it, and make it a more user-friendly document so that it's easier to administer, enforce, and understand from both sides of the dais. And the way that begins, the way we begin all of these projects is by revamping the glossary, the definition of terms section of the zoning ordinance. So one of the things that you have before you this evening is a 35-page document that is just A to Z definitions of terms that are typically used in the zoning ordinance, used in your ordinance, and the uses. Every use that is permitted, whether by special use permit or by right, should be defined in an ordinance. And very commonly, it isn't. The idea is when you end up in court, not if, but when, you want to be arguing over your definitions and not somebody else's. And so it's very important when you're making a zoning determination, you're trying to work with an applicant to figure out if what they're wanting to do is permitted or not permitted, where it's permitted. The definitions are where you turn. It's what you hang your hat on. So what we have before you is a list of, it's your definition section, 58.1. If it's plain text, then it is what it is, and we didn't recommend changing it. If it's struck through, we're recommending that that existing term be deleted and usually replaced. If it's underlined, then that's new text. So the definition section kind of has a purpose section that we added to give some context, and then it's off to the races, A to Z, on all of the terms that are used in zoning. It's very easy to get lost in this document and lost in the weeds, and I would not recommend that you dive into it and start reading it page to page to page. I would say make a list of notes that, based on your experience, you know you've had issues with terms, lack of terms, what does it mean, discussions, and make a list, and then dive in. Start in the P's, start in the S's, start in the B's, whatever the terms are that have given you the most hassle, and see if this resolves it or if it causes more confusion. That'll kind of get your mind into it. I also would not start with the definitions at all. The other thing that's in front of you is a use matrix. And what this is going to end up being is a window into the zoning ordinance. It's just a tool that'll be on your website that developers, applicants, realtors, residents can look at to see what is permitted where. But what we're using it for initially is it's a diagnostic tool to show you what is currently permitted where, and what we're proposing that is new, and where we're proposing to have it, and where we're proposing to delete it. So if the term is italicized and or underlined, it's new, it's plain text, it already exists in the ordinance, whether it's defined or not, it's there. And same thing with the uses. B or by right uses, which means they're permitted as long as all the regulations are followed. And S is special use permit, so it means they're permitted by special use. If there isn't anything by use in a district, it is not permitted in that district. So this is just a good way of laying it out and basically being able to say, hey, here's what your ordinance says and or what we're proposing it to say, and then you can evaluate it from that standpoint. One of the things that Haymarket's zoning ordinance does currently, which most zoning ordinances do, is it tries to list out everything they could possibly think of. Abattoir, circus, widget maker, hair production facility, whatever. What we're doing is we're saying, look, there's some basic use categories: ag, residential, civic, commercial, industrial. And then within those categories, there are uses, there are use types. You know, there are general stores and specialty stores. There are personal services and personal improvement services. Things that have a definition that are broader than, and a lot of different names can fit into that. If you're a 7-Eleven, are you a convenience store or are you a gas station? Well, do you have fuel pumps? If you have fuel pumps, you're a gas station and a convenience store, but you're going to be treated like you're a gas station, because typically that's going to be the most restrictive use. So we're trying to modernize the ordinance and get it so that, you know, when I come in and say, you know, I want a use that, you know, you bring your pet to get groomed and you drop your kid off to play and you go grocery shopping. And what is that? You know, is that a grocery store or daycare or a kennel or all three? And so what this ordinance is going to do is try to help us make that determination and basically say, hey, I don't care what you are or what you call yourself. If you have a dog, it can bark, and that's a kennel use, and that's only permitted here. And the other thing we're going to try to do with this ordinance is reduce the number of special use permits. Typically, people like that because it gives control. And really, if you think about certain uses that you always see, that you always approve, what control are you giving? Are you giving the same conditions for those uses? Fine, allow it by right with those conditions. So we're going to add a use and design standards section, which basically says gas stations need to do these things. Doesn't matter what district they're in, they need to do these things. You know, hair salon needs to do these things. Kennel needs to do these things. So those are the types of things to think about. And again, when you're going into the use matrix, don't just dive in and start going down the categories. And my intent isn't to go through this exercise with you this evening either. That's going to be your homework assignment. But make a list and say, you know, that CUP we had about X, that was contentious. I'm not sure we should permit those at all in that district. Or, you know, the 13 things we had last year, the home occupations, why are we reviewing those? They're always approved. They're innocuous. Why can't we just develop a standard that defines that and allows it by right with certain conditions? And that's how to start thinking about it, and then dive in and look for those uses, and then see where they're permitted, and then see if you agree with it or not. Make a list of questions, but that'll get your mind into it, and then once you're into the rhythm, it'll start clicking, I think. What we would like to do moving forward is receive your input, and so usually what I try to do is give the homework assignment that by your next meeting, turn your homework in. You can give it to Sherry or Marchant, Brian, whoever, and then they'll filter it to us. We'll look at it, respond back, whether we agree, disagree, further research is required, whatever. And then we'll give you a revised version that you can then look at, compare with your notes, and see if the changes have been made or not. And I can come back. We can discuss that. That's a way more efficient and effective way than just going line by line and trying to think about it on the fly. You get 5 individuals, and Brian and Marchand have already done this. You get 7, 8 individuals looking at this, doing the same thing. You cover it, and it's way better than just me doing it or just him doing it. You're getting all these pairs of eyes and brains looking at it, and it's highly effective. And then we'll weave this into the districts as the uses. It'll be a nice streamlined list of uses, no long laundry list of this and that. It's just a nice list of uses that are defined, that have district standards and use standards as appropriate. And that's going to be your revised zoning ordinance. Does that make sense? Do y'all have any questions?
Yes, sir, just a couple. When I was thinking as you were talking, is it fair to say that an ordinance rewrite will help our businesses?
That certainly should be an impact of it, yes. The things that confound businesses, confuse businesses, act as barriers to businesses can be removed, modified, eliminated in this ordinance rewrite. Still want to have good regulations that protect the health, welfare, safety of the town, But if there are things, like we discussed earlier, site plan requirements, you know, if, just because you're changing a use doesn't necessarily mean you need to do a full site plan. If the use that's changed, if it's going from a bookstore to a toy store, who cares,
Still a store.
right? Now, if you're going from a bookstore to a restaurant, that's a different set of impacts. If you're going from a bookstore to a fast food restaurant or a drive-through restaurant, that's a different set of impacts. A bookstore to a drive-through bank, that's a different set of impacts. But if you're just going from one use to another use and it's kind of the same use type and parking requirements are the same, there's no exterior alterations, there's no building inspection, building code really issues, it should just issue a permit and rock and roll. So we can bring those types of clarifications.
And it seems like looking back over the last years, we've spent an inordinate amount of time approving home businesses where, you know, somebody's baking cupcakes and selling them, or, you know, they have an office dedicated, they telecommute. Seems like we waste a lot of time on that.
Just on that point, we have about 12 performance standards that go along with it. So more often than not, you would the reason for having a public hearing is there's some unique circumstance. But if we've all agreed upon how that impact is mitigated, which we've done by listing those 12 standards,
Then we don't need an SUP.
it seems exactly, and so it creates. You know, the Chick-fil-A is another example where that took an inordinate amount of time because of the special use permit for that, changing the text because of the drive-through spaces, the site plan amendments. I mean, there's a lot of things that through this exercise we would hope if another fast food restaurant came in, they would simply need to go through the site planning phase. There's simply been talk even having you just be the only reviewing authority of the site plan and not the council. That would have saved months of work and effort. So,
All right, as long as we have the parameters with which to make a determination, and we all know what the parameters are, I think it just helps. And then the last thing, see what my fellow folks up here have to say. So everywhere you see something underlined, it's new. Everything with the stricken line through, you're proposing removing, and everything without either one of those is new.
It's existing.
Okay.
This is how it reads currently.
Okay, so underline is new.
And underline is new. So like if you turn to page 3 and look at home occupation class A, you'll see that we're proposing in R1 and R2 that we buy right instead of special use.
Right.
That would address what you were just talking about. And those 12 standards would be use and design standards for home occupation class A's. And every home occupation would come in to get a permit, they would have to adhere to those standards, and they'd be good to go. You wouldn't see it here. You just go there and patronize them if that's the type of business that they're doing. Typically, that if you're going there, that's a class B, and that would still be a special use permit. So, in other words, one of the main differences between a Class A and a Class B is, do you have employees and do people come to you? Because that's traffic.
Okay, so Class A is employees.
So Class A, so then what you do if you're looking at this and you go, well, what's the distinction? And you go to your definitions and you say, there are the H's, they're on page 12. And home occupation Class A is an occupation conducted primarily on site involving persons residing on the premises. Such occupations may require the use of accessory structures or outside areas. No more than 5 clients or customers shall be allowed on the premises at any one time. So it does allow a small-scale level of visitation. And then home occupation Class B is occupation conducted primarily on site involving persons residing on the premises and not more than 2 full or part-time outside employees. Such occupations may require the use of accessory structures, and more than 10 clients or customers shall be allowed on the premises. And that would require a special use permit, whereas a Class A would not. And so one of those things, when you're looking at it, is you go, okay, well, that sounds great. Or somebody might look at that and go, well, why 5 or why 10? We think it should be 12 or whatever. And that's where we can fine-tune it, tweak it. That's what makes it Haymarket's ordinance, not somebody else's. And that's where the level of comfort is reflected in the revised ordinance.
I may make one suggestion, Mr. Chairman. So most of us are, given the small size and scale of the town, is just, we gave you the zoning map, and also the long-range land use map. What you do is you would walk, I'd say when you guys are walking through town or doing your thing, and say, on that piece of property, I know that it's zoned X. Do I envision in that district all these uses? Make sense? So you would simply, and again, kind of take my planner hat off as a resident, next to the animal hospital is all B1. In theory, an auto service facility right now by ordinance could go there. Would that be the most appropriate use at that end of town? It's also designated, so it's that kind of exercise saying, with the context of each of these districts, what's around it, what is the plan or long-range land use plan, and kind of visualize in your head those types of uses that may or may not. And we also talked about question of degree. Does, can I bring up the hotel example? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the hotel example. You know, we have the rezoning, the fairgrounds rezoning that wants to do a 75-foot high hotel at the interchange. Well, that makes sense, given it's near the interchange, meant to deal with a transient public. You would not want a 7-story hotel here, but it may make sense to have a smaller hotel in our B1 district. So that's where creating some distinction between is a gas station downtown different than a gas station on the west end of town. All those sorts of kind of thoughts. Now, one detail is in our zoning ordinance right now, we have a transitional commercial district. We've never applied that district. When the comprehensive plan was written, in the plan land use map, it created a transitional commercial designation. And the idea was that someone would come in and rezone it to that district. Does that make sense? So right now, nowhere on our zoning map do we have a transitional commercial designated district. We have a district, but nothing's ever been mapped at. So that's another thing to kind of pay attention to when you're looking at the table and saying those uses that are transitional commercial, not on the zoning map, but would be anticipated in these areas. So look at the compatibility of those uses. So, make sense?
And as part of this exercise, if the town wanted to, you could rezone those areas to transitional commercial proactively. Or you could, wait and see if applications come in to do that. The benefit of doing it proactively is you're then saying this is what we want to see in these areas. The downside to doing that is any ability to collect proffers or anything along those lines is diminished. Although with the recent changes to the state code, our ability to negotiate proffers went to 0. So we can't even bring it up. In which case, if you see a rezoning, my official advice to you would be, if it doesn't have proffers, just say that they haven't mitigated the adverse impacts and vote it down. See if they come back with proffers.
The fairgrounds property that came in has a residential component, but they precede the law doesn't get the legislation we're talking about doesn't go into effect till July.
So literally earlier today, I went back through the transitional commercial district. And the first time I went through it, I didn't realize it didn't exist on the map. And so I looked at the future land use map and I said, okay, if I were these houses living in this area, what would I be okay with and what would I be less okay with? And so that was my, how I made the recommendations that I've made. With the hotel example, you'll see that in the town center, B1, it's listed as a special use permit. I think maybe it could be by right, but it would have use and design standards that would say no more than X stories, dress scale, mass, parking, those things. So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot to it. It's a lot of moving parts. But the best way to do it is to think about what has been a problem, what has not been a problem in the past, and then how does this propose to address it? And this is the opportunity to fix those things.
All right, do either one of you have any questions?
No.
Comments? All right.
This is a great help to me. One of the, given that I've almost, it's hard to believe I've been doing this almost 9 years now, is it's not a user-friendly document. So a lot of my time is spent people asking me, well, I can't make sense of this ordinance, could you please email me? So a lot of times it's emailing calls. So to create a document that's better self-serving, that'll save a lot of time of us having to return phone calls. So thanks.
All right, well, thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much. Hopefully you'll find it to be, if not an exciting exercise, a productive exercise.
Well, it's an important exercise. All right, well, thank you. All right, moving on. Old business, we have the sign ordinance update. Marchant?
Sign ordinance was at the finish line, and then there were some new court decisions that regulated Christmas lights.
Are you
So-
serious?
Christmas decorations. So Martin went back and made some amendments to the ordinance. We also had a speaker at one of the meetings raise some objections regarding temporary signs. I think the example she gave was if I wanted to put up candidate signs along the front of my yard, the way the ordinance was written, I could only put 2 candidates, and that's it. Was that the intended consequence? So Martin went back and made some revisions to that provision. We had also talked about doing some caps on the amount of signage you could have. In other words, we had said, here are all the signs available to you with no limitation on how many signs you would have. But the question became was, do we want to have an overall cap on the amount of signs? And so we'll be looking at that. Bottom line is we're making those revisions. I'm going to bring it back to you next month, scoot it as fast as possible to the council and get it adopted. It'll be included in the rewrite that Darren's doing, and hopefully get people on their way. So I am anxious, too, to get that going. So thanks for your patience. Or I may discuss about maybe doing a joint public hearing with the council along with the special use permit that we have coming up. So I'll coordinate with the chairman about that later on.
The 1 mile notice update, am I correct in saying that Chick-fil-A was supposed to break ground yesterday, or? Okay,
They had a groundbreaking ceremony. They were held up starting construction because of a Dominion easement. So they're waiting to break ground next week. We did our pre-construction kickoff about a week or so ago. The ice rink expansion, they've moved a lot of material. They're starting to do the expansion there. I've not heard back from Sheets with their final plan. I know they're trying to put their final site plan together. I issued zoning permits for 2 houses on Blight Drive, corner of Blight Drive and Washington Street, lots 51 and 52, which is the one on the corner and the one right behind it. I expect they're going to start pouring their foundations this week. So that'll certainly change that dynamic. It's not until the end of the project do they have to plant trees and shrubs on the town side. They had to go back and screen Villages of Haymarket. So that'll happen near the end of the project. Probably in the fall. They're missing the window to plant in the spring, so it'll probably be in the fall. Also met with the VRE group, along with Joe Pastanello. They are looking at identifying some potential sites in town for a rail station and also just west of town. So they're reaching out. I agree with this. They're reaching out to the landowners first before they start showing locations on a map. And so there's a series of hearings and meetings in April where they'll talk about that. So we'll see what goes on from there. John Marshall Commons, this was the rezoning that was just east of Pace West School or QBE Business Campus. That was the townhomes and the apartments. That got put on the shelf. The landowners are now petitioning the Board of Supervisors to do a plan amendment, comprehensive plan amendment. One of the objections was that area is predominantly planned for commercial, and they were wanting to convert the majority of the property to residential. So the board had said, we'll go about it holistically and take a look.
How many units did they?
Between the towns and the multifamily, I want to say it's about 160. The Fairgrounds rezoning did come in. I think I told you about that already. They reduced their units from 120 down to 87 townhouse units. They're asking for an SUP, special use, actually no, not for SUP. They're asking for the hotel use. And Lidl is the grocer that wants to come in, and it would go next to Chick-fil-A.
What was the name of that?
Lidl, Lidl. If you look online, it looks more like a cross between a Trader Joe's and an Aldi. They're claiming that their market's going to be more of a cross between Trader Joe's and a Harris Teeter. And they expect their specialty to be like wine and baked goods. We did talk to them about not, that we can't prohibit competition, but we wanted to make sure that they're not inadvertently affecting Food Lion. We don't want to have a Reagan storefront, so they said they're confident that they appeal to a different market. I've not heard anything back on the site planning for across the street. The council is looking at a blight ordinance. It's a more aggressive blight ordinance. We're wanting to send that out to the property owners and basically announce that the council will adopt it. And hopefully that'll motivate some of these property owners once they see that we have the ability to put mechanics liens, to address fines. Hopefully that'll help. So a lot happening in a short period of time.
Right, and Chick-fil-A is starting next week, because
Correct,
I've
they'll be
had
out there with
several
equipment.
people.
I think it was 18 weeks. They're going to have a construction trailer out there. Apparently, a couple days before they open, they have people camp out to win tickets for free sandwiches for a year. So it was all over Facebook this afternoon. They'll be doing those types of things. Also, if you haven't seen across the street yet, the Caboose, we got a grant to do the pedestrian or ADA access to the Caboose, and that's what you see going on. And then Earth Day is coming up pretty soon. So.
And last question for me, is this interchange Divergent Diamond still, looks like it's still on course to finish?
It may well be ahead of schedule,
Yeah,
but yeah, they're rocking and rolling with that.
making good progress.
They've got a lot of sound walls going up. They actually look fairly attractive, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure the timing of them opening the pedestrian side of the Old Carolina Bridge, but I think it has done a lot to relieve traffic in and around town. So,
All right, anything else?
no, thank you.
All right, I make a motion that we adjourn
Oh, Dunkin' Donuts, never forget Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts.
I heard it was gonna be Krispy Kreme.
What's this?
1 mile notification, Heritage Hunt Dunkin'
Oh,
Donuts.
yes, I'm sorry, yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to announce that. So we get the courtesy 1 mile notices. So
Right.
you know where the 7-Eleven is?
Yes.
Up in Heathcote? No,
Yep.
no, where Harris Teeter went in.
Yes,
They want to put a Krispy Kreme
Oh, no.
with a drive-through, or Dunkin' Donuts with a drive-through.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a gym next to that to help people work off the caloric intake. That's why the gym's coming to Haymarket, right?
I've heard about that. It's pretty interesting.
Okay.
Called the Orange Effect or something for that?
I don't know.
Some crazy name.
Okay, yeah.
It's a new style of gym, more like circuit training.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Thanks.
well, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. All right, thank you.